Hello everyone and welcome to the conclusion of Joan of Arc. So it's the end, the last part. I thought I would just finish it now. Joan's brother, Jacques, died in Domremy during the great trial of Rouen. This was according to the prophecy which Joan made that day in the pastures, the time that she said the rest of us would go to the great wars. When a poor old father heard of the martyrdom, it broke his heart, and he died. Her mother was granted a pension by the city of Orleans, and upon this she lived out her days, which were many. 24 years after her illustrious child's death, she travelled all the way to Paris in the winter time and was present at the opening of the discussion in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which was the first step in rehabilitation. Paris was crowded with people from all about France, who came to get a sight of the venerable dame, and it was a touching spectacle when she moved through the reverent, wet-eyed multitudes on her way to the grand honours awaiting her at the cathedral. With her were Jean and Pierre, no longer the light-hearted youths who marched with us from Vauclair, the war-torn veterans with hair beginning to show frost. After the martyrdom, Noel and I went back to Domremy, but presently when the Constable Richmond superseded La Tremoille as the King's chief adviser and began the completion of Joan's great work, we put on our harness and returned to the field and fought for the King all through the wars and skirmishes until France was freed of the English. It was what Joan would have desired of us, and dead or alive, her desire was law for us. All the survivors of the personal staff were faithful to her memory and fought for the King to the end. Mainly we were well scattered, but when Paris fell we happened to be together. It was a great day and a joyous, but it was a sad one at the same time, because Joan was not there to march into the captured capital with us. Noel and I remained always together, and I was by his side when death claimed him. It was in his last great battle of war. In that battle fell also Joan's sturdy old enemy Talbot. He was 85 years old, and had spent his life in battle. A fine old lion he was, and his tameless spirit, yes, indestructible energy as well, for he fought as knightly and vigorous a fight that day as the best man there. La Hire survived the martyrdom 13 years, and always fighting, of course, for that was all he enjoyed in life. I did not see him in all that time, for we were apart, but one was always hearing of him. The Bastard of Orleans and d'Alençon d'Orléans lived to see France free, and to testify with Jean and Pierre d'Arc, and Pasquerel, and me at the rehabilitation. But they are all at rest now, these many years. I alone am left of those who fought at the side of Joan of Arc in the great wars. She said I would live until those wars were forgotten, a prophecy which failed. If I should live 1,000 years it would still fail, for whatsoever had touch with Joan of Arc, that thing is immortal. Members of Joan's family married, and they have left descendants. They are descendants of the nobility, but their family name and blood bring them honours which no other nobles receive or may hope for you. You have seen how everybody along the way uncovered when those children came yesterday to pay their duty to me. It was not because they are noble. It is because they are grandchildren of the brothers of Joan of Arc. Now, as to the rehabilitation. Joan crowned the king at Reims. For reward he allowed her to be hunted to a death without making one effort to save her. During the next 23 years he remained indifferent to her memory, indifferent to the fact that her good name was under a damning blot, put there by the priest because of the deeds which she had done in saving him and his sceptre, indifferent to the fact that France was ashamed, and longer to have the deliverer's fair fame restored. Indifferent all that time. Then he suddenly changed, and was anxious to have justice for poor Joan himself. Why? Had he become grateful at last? Had remorse attacked him? Had it attacked his hard heart? No, he had a better reason, a better one for his sort of man. This better reason was that, now that the English had been finally expelled from the country, they were beginning to call attention to the fact that this king had gotten his crown by the hand of a person proven by priests to have been in league with Satan and burnt for them, for the sorceress. Therefore, of what value or authority was such a kingship as that? Of no value at all. No nation could afford to allow such a king to remain on the throne. It was high time to stir now. The king did it. That is how Charles VII came to be smitten with anxiety to have justice done to the memory of his benefactress. He appealed to the Pope, and the Pope appointed a great commission of churchmen to examine into the facts of Joan's life and award judgment. The commission sat at Paris, at Domremy, at Rouen and Orleans, and several other places, and continued its work during several months. It examined the records of Joan's trials. It examined the Bastard of Orleans and the Duke d'Alençon, Douallon, Pasquerel, and Courcelles, Isambard, Dalipierre, Manchon, and me, and many others whose names I have made familiar to you. Also, they examined more than 100 witnesses whose names are less familiar to you, the friends of Joan in Domremy, Vaucouleurs, Orleans, and other places, a number of judges, and other people who had assisted at the Rouen trials, the abjuration and the martyrdom. And out of this exhaustive examination, Joan's character and history came spotless and perfect, and this verdict was placed upon record to remain forever. I was present upon most of these occasions. I saw again many faces which I had not seen for a quarter of a century, among them some well-beloved faces, those of our generals, that of Catherine Boucher, married, alas, and also among them certain faces that filled me with bitterness, such as Beaupierre, Courcelles, and a number of the fellow fiends. I saw Humette and little Mengite, edging along toward 50 now, and mothers of many children. I saw Noel's father and the parents of the Paladin and the Sunflower. It was beautiful to hear the Duke d'Alençon praise Joan's splendid capacities as a general, and to hear the bastard endorse these praises with his eloquent tongue, and then go on and tell how sweet and good Joan was, and full of pluck and fire and impetuosity, mischief, mirthfulness, tenderness, and compassion, everything that was pure and fine and noble and lovely. He made her live again, right before me, and wrung my heart. I have finished the telling of Joan of Arc, that wonderful child, that sublime personality, that spirit which, in one regard, has had no peer and will have none this, its purity from all alloy of self-seeking, self-interest, personal ambition. It is no trace of these motives can be found. Search as you may, this cannot be said of any other person whose name appears in profane history. With Joan of Arc, love of country was more than a sentiment, it was a passion. She was a genius of patriotism. She was patriotism embodied, concreted, made flesh and palpable to the touch and visible to the eye. Love, mercy, charity, fortitude, war, peace, poetry, music, these may be symbolized, or I shall prefer, by figures of either sex or any age. But a slender girl, in her first young bloom, with a martyr's crown upon her head, and in her hand the sword and the severed her country's bonds, shall not this and no other stand for patriotism through all the ages until time shall end? And that is the end of Joan of Arc. All done, all finished. And yeah, she was definitely rehabilitated. She wasn't a witch or a heretic or a sorceress. She did not, she didn't have plans with the devil and Satan and all these other beings. She was a saint, and she was a martyrdom, and she was remembered then forever a martyr, for she died for her country. They did that though, in all fairness, the king was still an ingrate, because he did it for his own benefit, not for hers. Let's remember that. I wish he would have done it for her benefit. If he'd have done it for her benefit, he should have actually saved her, but he didn't, did he? And that's how I feel about that in particular. Because I do believe they could have attacked and rescued Joan. I believe they could have done that, but I know they didn't do that, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. They just let her die. And then when finally the armies had taken France back, like Joan said they would, and it did take them over 20 years, like she said it would, then he decided he had to give her a honourable name, because otherwise it was her that crowned him king. So it was for himself, wasn't it? The ingrate. Thank you for listening to all of Joan of Arc, the life of Joan of Arc, her death, and the afterwards, I guess. You can read history books and it will tell you all about the battles, and it will just give you simple historical facts. You won't get to know about the bits that someone writes in a journal like this, the little bits that they never add in, like the fact that they actually tried to fight a ghost in Catherine Boucher's house, which is quite comical. But yeah, many blessings.